Okay, so welcome to CSR Marketplace Virtual 2025. In today's session, Navigating Global Corporate Philanthropy in Today's World, sponsored by CAF America. My name is Jean Metzger. I'm the Vice President of Membership Marketing and Communications here at ACCP, and I'm so glad you are able to join us this afternoon. Today's session is one of 9 that we're doing this week as part of CSR Marketplace Virtual. You'll see the full schedule on the screen. Registration will remain open through the end of the week, so feel free to register for the remaining sessions. And all of the sessions are being recorded, and the recordings will be shared out and posted to our website next week, and will be available through the end of the year. Before getting started with today's program, I do want to just share information about some upcoming ACCP programs. Our next members-only topical discussion will be on signature partnerships, and that will be on July 10th. We will be releasing our CSR Insight Survey results on July 17th. Also that afternoon is our monthly ACCP membership webinar. You can hear everything that's going on here at ACCP and what you can expect in the coming months, as well as meet our new CEO, Andrea Wood, at our State of the Association meeting on August 19th. So I encourage you all to register for that. And we will be celebrating our 20th anniversary this year at our annual conference in Atlanta on September 15th through 17th. We do hope that you can join us. A special note that the early bird registration deadline is this coming Friday. So we do encourage you to register in order to get the best registration fee. And then we'll round out our educational programs on November 12 and 13 with our Employee Engagement Virtual Summit. Registration is open for all these programs right now on our website, so encourage you to register and participate. We also have been getting out into the community this year. We have several local happy hours that are scheduled. We will be in Minneapolis on July 30th. We'll be in Boston on September 25th. We'll be in New York on October 16th, and we'll be in San Francisco in the first week of December. The registration is open for the Minneapolis happy hour right now, and we should have the registration for the rest of them open by the end of the week. So we hope that you will join us and keep an eye out for invitations. If you are already an ACCP member and you want to learn more about everything that is available to you as a member, we do encourage you to check out our membership page. And the same goes for anyone who might be considering ACCP membership. We would love to welcome you to our community. You'll see a QR code on your screen and the link to our membership page where you can learn more. I also will drop my email in the chat. If you have any questions about ACCP, please reach out. And now for just some session Zoom logistics. We have turned on live transcript. So if you click on live transcript and then click the caret and click on view full transcript, you'll have access to that information. We do encourage you to participate and engage with one another and engage with our speaker through the Zoom chat. And we do want to hear your questions and answer your questions. So please use Zoom Q&A on the bottom to put in your questions. And if you see a question that you also are interested in, please click on the thumbs up icon so that we know to prioritize that question. And with that, I think we should get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mary Bradach, who's the Director of Business Development at CAF America. Mary, please take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Jean, and congratulations on the 20th anniversary of ACCP. So I was not aware of that, so that's wonderful. So, well, good morning, everyone, and I guess good afternoon for many of you, depending on where you're dialing in from. While CAF America's headquarters are in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of DC, I'm actually joining you today from Buffalo, New York. So thanks so much for being here, and a special thank you to the ACCP for hosting this CSR Marketplace. You know, this is a really valuable space for connection and shared learning and innovation. And, you know, as Jean shared earlier, there's been many interesting topics kind of already this week and some to follow tomorrow. And CAF America and myself are definitely grateful for the opportunity to be part of the conversation. So I'm, as Jean mentioned, Mary Bradach, the Director of Business Development at CAF America. So before joining the philanthropic sector, I spent more than 20 years in corporate financial services. So I really kind of deeply appreciate the role that each of you play in advancing your company's values and commitment through CSR and philanthropy. I know I was proud of the work our corporate foundation did in many of the communities we served, and grateful that in my work with CAF America, I'm still able to and have the opportunity to work with companies like yours to make an impact globally. As companies are growing their global footprint, their impact programs often need to cross borders, which brings both exciting opportunities and unique challenges. So today, we're going to explore how to navigate those challenges with, the right tools, information, and strategies. Let me just advance the slide. Okay, so for the next, I'd say 30 minutes or so, we're just going to cover, I'm going to do a quick overview of CAF America and our role in international giving. And then we're going to explore how the global giving landscape has become, a little more complex, both from a US policy shift standpoint, but also through the tightening of regulations in countries where many of your companies may want to fund. And then we'll discuss some tangible ways that your company can navigate the environment successfully. And as Jean mentioned, we'll leave time for Q&A, so definitely, feel free to jot down or put in the chat box any questions that you may have. So to help us get started with kind of this topic, we're going to have a little poll. So I'm going to ask Barbara to kind of bring up the poll. And we're asking, how many countries does your company grant to, on average over a year or an average grant cycle? So we'll leave a few minutes to, or a few seconds to let you all respond. Great, it looks like we have somewhat of a variety. Many of you that do, over 20, and some that are, looks like kind of entering the global philanthropy space. But, I imagine those of you with larger numbers probably have a lot more familiarity with, some of the complexities that may come along with international giving. So keep that number in mind as you go, as we kind of walk through today's material, it may help shape sort of how you approach both risk and opportunity. So quickly, for a brief overview of CAF America, let me slide forward. Right. So CAF America exists to accelerate progress in society towards a fair and sustainable future for all. So we're part of the global Charities Aid Foundation network with over 100 years experience. In the North America, we're CAF America, and there's CAF Canada. And in the UK, they're known as just CAF. And sitting in the middle of the giving world, we partner with corporate and individual donors to enable them to give with greater impact, and with social purpose organizations who are doing life-changing work around the world. And so together we're able to give more. So I just briefly shared, briefly the what and why of CAF America, and this is just a slide on the how. So, international giving with CAF America really focuses on, we call it the 3 R's, but, regulatory compliance, risk management, and reputation protection. So we are a U.S. public charity and operate within all IRS guidelines, which allows our clients to receive full tax benefits for their international donations. And more importantly, we help clients navigate the compliance, operational, and reputational risks that can be associated with giving across borders. So just a snapshot of our reach, and this is a CAF America snapshot. CAF America has been around just over 30 years as part of the broad CAF global network. Since our founding, we've distributed more than 4.6 billion across 135 countries to nearly 380,000 organizations. And like many of you, we look at this and, they're really not just numbers. They really represent, real world partnerships, from frontline disaster response teams to long-term education, health, and environmental initiatives, all around the world. And more than anything, it represents, the individuals, corporations, and foundations, like many of yours, who are really having a significant impact. And our work spans all 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we bring this global lens to our partnerships with corporate clients every day. So the question, again, many of you are engaged in this and are answering, this for yourselves, but why should your company give internationally, or, why should they consider expanding their global giving? It's not just about responding to crises or regulatory obligations. Of course, those are important, but there are many reasons why a company would want to make a global impact with their charitable dollars. For many, it's about aligning corporate values with global realities, engaging their employees around the world, supporting communities in their supply chains, in the places that they reside, and addressing global issues and causes that will really make a difference. As I experienced as an employee in a corporation, and I'm sure many of you do, you want to feel connected to your company's impact, wherever you live and work. So, we look at it in short that international giving really isn't just a check. It's a real commitment to shared values, local empowerment, and global connection, and reflects the company's leadership and values beyond borders. And while most of you, likely don't need convincing about sort of the why of international giving, we know that the decisions in a corporation are made by many different stakeholders. Often when companies approach us for help with international giving, their legal and compliance teams often raise two key concerns. The first is the risk of non-compliance or sanctions exposure, and the other is really a perceived lack of control. So, especially around how their brand may be associated with the grantee. So before we take a look at the current giving environment and what is changing, I'm just going to take a brief look broadly at what is involved in cross-border giving overall, and why there are additional considerations and requirements beyond what's needed and, what we do for domestic giving. Advance the slide, let's see. So first, let's take a look at what are the risks. When it comes to cross-border giving, the two main areas that need to be addressed, are sort of the U.S. compliance side, and then secondly, the laws in the grantee country. So in the U.S., we look at two things when we're considering due diligence. The first is the work we're funding charitable? Verifying the charitability of the grants that are being made. And then secondly, is the recipient organization compliant with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing standards? So the first, for the first, is the work we're funding charitable? Expenditure responsibility and equivalency determination are the tools that are used to ensure that the company can benefit from the allowed tax deductions that are required by the IRS. And this is especially relevant if funding is coming from a corporate foundation or from a DAF held by the company. Now, we can go much deeper into discussions about expenditure responsibility, equivalency determination, the requirements of each, why one versus the other. But for the purposes today, we just want to share that these are the tools that the IRS has approved to grant access to, to assess the charitability of an organization or a project receiving an international grant. And then, on the U.S. side, from a legal risk perspective, we're basically following the rules for international financial transactions. And that's, the AML, anti-money laundering, the counter-financing terrorist risks, self-dealing issues, sanctions for high-risk geographies. And so this is really all from a compliance regulatory lens. From the recipient's country side, we asked, can the organization legally receive foreign funds? Are there restrictions or registration requirements that, that we would need to navigate? And so today we're really talking about a mix of the two, the U.S. compliance side, and then the grantee country's local regulations. And, we're looking at what has changed in the external environment that can make these two pieces more challenging. And what we're seeing is changes in regulations globally that impact how philanthropy can be done. Okay. So in terms of like, let me go back a slide. So in terms of, taking a look at what's changing, as we know, there's a lot happening right now. And, while we're not going to get into the daily news, kind of a topic for another day, when it comes to grant making, these are some of the things that may have an impact on you and your organization and kind of your approach to grant making. And may affect how you approach both broad giving and your partnerships. So the first is really the U.S. cuts to U.S. aid and other foreign aid programs that really mean that nonprofits abroad are losing vital resources, and we see stories about that every single day. And then at the same time, in many of the countries that we're looking to fund, restrictions are growing. So some countries now require foreign funded organizations to register, to disclose their funders or follow new rules about how they operate. And this can, clearly impact how organizations, can access our funding as well as, funding from our corporate partners. And so both of these are going to act together. And what we see is that even though, we're a U.S. organization, we're actually most impacted by changes to the foreign organizations. And as you've probably experienced, these really are not theoretical concerns. They directly impact, the ability to support overseas partners and can increase the complexity of the grant making that's being done. So, impact of funding changes, here, and this is really what we're hearing from organizations, and if you're in international philanthropy, it's likely that organizations that you're giving to and support are either caught up or impacted by changes in funding flows. So we surveyed CAF America eligible charities, that were affected by U.S. aid cuts, and the results were really sobering. Some of the organizations lost up to 80% of their annual operating budget. Over half expected to lay off staff. And nearly all of them said they would reduce services or the number of people served. So significant impact on the organizations that we and many of you aspire to support. And this data really underscores why corporate giving can be vital in bridging these funding gaps. So, as you're considering your next round of funding and your strategy, it's hopefully something that definitely can and will inform your decisions about funding and partnerships. For many of the nonprofits, corporate philanthropy is really a lifeline. It's becoming, one of several avenues that still are available. So your decisions, your partnerships, can really help stabilize the social impact ecosystems that are, otherwise really at this point, at risk of collapse or of being even further impacted. And so in looking at, on the grantee side, there's really, several ways that countries are, implementing or executing, regulations or changes that are having a significant impact. And the tools, some of the common tools are, foreign agent laws and registries. In Russia, as an example, foreign funding restrictions or banned grantor lists. This is what we're seeing in India. Overly burdensome banking processes. Something that we're experiencing in Brazil, as an example. Government oversight and approvals for specific charitable, activities. We're seeing that in Egypt and China. So, you can really, go country by country, and, we're seeing, an increasing amount of regulatory, requirements or actions that require, awareness and due diligence to ensure that we're not affecting or in some cases, possibly impacting future giving by sort of going against the country's regulations. Just to go deeper into India as an example. So nonprofits in India must have a valid FCRA registration, which is the Foreign Contribution Regulations Act, to be able to receive funds from donors outside of India. And there's been recent amendments now that have taken it a step further and require nonprofits to open a designated account at a single bank, the State Bank of India, which is a branch in New Delhi. Limit administrative expenses from foreign funds to 20%. Avoid regranting funds to other organizations. So these are all things that have come into play in India. And the impact has been big. So the impact, out of 21,000 nonprofit organizations that were previously registered under the FCRA, only about 15% successfully opened, the required bank accounts. So significant impact and significant, decrease in the organizations that were able to receive funding. Many well-established NGOs in India have also lost their licenses or faced delays due to paperwork issues. And many of these are not, really small or kind of fly-by-night groups. They're some of the India's most respected and long-standing civil, society players. And so really what this means for us, is that even if a grantee was compliant in the past, their ability to legally receive funding, your funding, our funding, have changed. And it's really reiterates the importance of, real-time due diligence. Really staying active and aware really matters. The last thing any of us want to do is be placed on a banned grantor list, and sadly that has happened. And just to share that really the trend isn't limited to India. Just in the last few months in 2025, these types of laws are continued to roll out in different countries. So just as an example, in Peru, new laws give the government greater oversight of nonprofits, and expand political influence over civil society, particularly international funds received by NGOs. And the penalties are really significant if an NGO is determined to have, acted outside the boundaries of the law. So it's, again, important to understand what the current country limitations are, and and ensure we're. Let me see if this is sliding. I think the deck just moved forward. Let me see. Let me bring it back to. Anyway, as it's moving forward, in El Salvador, as an example, they've implemented a new foreign agent registry that mimics Russia's, kind of very, okay, here we go. Right. That mimics Russia's laws. And really it requires organizations to disclose foreign funding and face significant penalties for non-compliance. In Hungary, nonprofits receiving foreign funding are listed publicly and must comply with new, management rules, creating reputational and administrative hurdles. Particularly organizations that are deemed to be a threat to Hungary's sovereignty. So these are just a few examples of some of the changes that are, it's important to stay abreast of, and these laws really are designed somewhat explicitly to discourage foreign support. But, fortunately, they don't make giving impossible. They just require, more careful navigation. And that's where, partnerships, pre-vetting, and strategic foresight are essential. So, although we're covering, sort of what's happening and some of the challenges, the real takeaway is that international giving is doable and really more necessary than ever. But it does require intentionality, and it's less about kind of whether you can give, but really more about, how you do it. So before we kind of go further, I'm going to take another quick poll. So Barbara's going to tee up the poll. Really, has the changing global landscape made it likely that your corporation, your corporate philanthropy will include more global giving, less global giving? Do you see it having no impact, or is this a question that may be actively kind of being discussed in your organization? So we'll give a second for everybody to. So yeah, it's interesting. So clearly, it's a topic on many corporations' minds, and really donors around the increasing complexity that that comes with some of these additional regulations. And I think our sort of strong message here is, although this environment may feel like it's a reason to retreat, we hopefully and feel strongly that it's really more of a reason really to step up. And hopefully, as the discussion we're having, we'll sort of open the gateway to feeling like this is definitely an avenue that you want to continue to go down and go down even further. And because even in the complexity, there's really real opportunity for leadership and impact from your organizations, and really from donors, of all kinds. So with that context, what can you do? What can we do? So we're going to just walk through a couple of the strategies that organizations that are maneuvering and navigating through this are adhering to. So clearly, due diligence is the first line of defense. It's really not just checking the box. It's really about knowing who you're funding, how they're operating, and whether they're legally eligible to receive your support. And this number two really is, although not every organization is equipped to do the due diligence, there's many organizations and experienced intermediaries who really understand how to navigate the complex environments. The goal of intermediaries is really to help facilitate that donor to grantee flow, particularly when there's levels of complexity that may otherwise feel prohibitive. Again, hugely important to stay informed and we say informed and agile. The policy environment is continuously changing. Ideally, you've got people on your team that may be keeping an eye out, but more than anything, stay connected to some resources, whether it be CAF America, other intermediaries, that there's a lot of people that are tracking, a lot of organizations that are tracking sort of what's going on, globally. So there are resources, there is support, and there is value in clearly continuing to work through this corporate giving globally, and continue to really help fill the gaps that exist today. So don't let complexity deter your global ambitions. Really just be prepared for the some of the changes that may come, and sometimes being agile and reaching out can make all the difference. So really, to close again, so I'm just going to leave you, really with this, that global philanthropy, as you know, is more than just a nice to have. It's really it's a strategic tool that advances your brand, engages your stakeholders, and strengthens civil society worldwide. And yes, it can be complex, but really complexity, can be managed. And many of you work in very complex organizations. This may just end up being another, another channel. And the key is to be proactive, informed, and supported by experienced partners. And definitely would love to hear any questions you may have, your own experiences, but definitely want to open it up for discussion.
So Mary, there is one question in the chat, so I'll read it up for you. For U.S. private foundations seeking to grant internationally, especially in a complex market like India, is the best/safest, most efficient route to give through a U.S. 501c3 affiliate. For example, the Akshaya Patra Foundation, sorry, that one's a new one to me, which operates in India but registered in the UK and US affiliates. How time-intensive/expensive is the pathway for direct India giving from a US private foundation?
So, giving to a 501(c)(3 kind of friends of funder is an option, but there are, clearly there are direct options, and CAF America is one organization among others that really support the direct giving from a private foundation to organizations, companies around nonprofit organizations around the world. So it has the same complexities I talked about today that can be managed, that can be worked through, or what exists when we're looking to support a private foundation who wants to give internationally. We're looking at the charitability of the end grantee. We're looking at clearly all of the sanctions rules, the anti-money laundering, terrorist financing. So all of that still exists, but again, it's a process that organizations, intermediate organizations are very equipped to do. And then from a grantee organization standpoint, we work very closely to ensure that they're able to receive those funds, whether again through the tools of equivalency determination or expenditure responsibility. Both are approaches depending on for the type of grant making, the purpose of the grant making. So, again, it's going to a U.S. organization is a option. I think, going through an intermediary who can help facilitate may broaden the ability to give, whether it be in India. And again, India, as I shared earlier, has its own, there are complexities, but again, having organizations that understand really what the requirements are, how to not run afoul of the local country's rules, is hugely important. But I think being involved in giving directly can be more impactful for you.
I have another question. So just to the message to the participants, please drop in any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A. But in the meantime, considering all the changes that we've seen in the funding cuts, what has CAF America seen in terms of international grant making? Have you seen an uptick in giving?
So we've seen a kind of I would say a variety of things. We've seen definitely an uptick in interest about helping to fill some of the gaps that we've talked about. Definitely both from the corporate side as well as the kind of the private client side, foundation side. Also, just looking at what's going on, politically and just the environment, we've seen a greater uptick of foundations that may want to look to grant internationally, and maybe manage some of their grant making funds internationally. So we've seen a variety of I would say impacts to what's going on, but definitely, I think. Definitely a heightened level of interest in international giving, based on sort of what we're, seeing every day.
And can you give the participants some guidance in terms of, in the countries where they're granting, and there's changes in the regulations, how do they determine, if they can still support the organizations that they have partnered with in the past?
Yeah. So, depending on where that company is where and how they're doing their grant making. I'll just give an example for companies that we're working with at CAF America. When they come to us, basically we're evaluating, are they already eligible through CAF America? Has there been anything that has changed that? Are there any kind of new regulations that, again, we're staying on top of literally daily, and what's going on around the world in the countries that we're giving to ensure that as grantors want to grant, that we're we're ensuring that we're aligned and complying with the local country rules. And as I shared earlier, those really are the ones that are probably changing or are evolving more quickly and having a bigger impact on U.S. global giving.
Thank you. One final question. So the current presidential administration has targeted specific countries and with some of their cuts and new regulations. What has been the impact for giving in those countries? Is there special considerations?
So I wouldn't say there's special considerations per se, but clearly those are the programs in some of those countries are the one, are getting, there's a lot of news around them and a lot of visibility around, some of the significant impacts that they're having on the people in those countries, or the types of programs or medical programs that are no longer being supported. So I think they're kind of two separate things. So that in and of itself isn't impacting how or where we can give. However, it is impacting the interest there is in helping to support some of those programs that are being impacted. We're also seeing because of that, a fair amount of, I would say, more sort of partnership or collective giving. So I think there's a real opportunity for whether it be foundations or corporations, to partner with others. And there's a lot of we could talk offline about some of the opportunities we've seen or the approaches both foundations and corporations have taken. But to really help maximize impact, that's something that we're seeing a little more of, is this kind of co-funding of some of these areas that are being impacted.
Interesting. Last chance for questions from the audience. With that, Mary, I want to thank you and CAF America for your insights and guidance today. It's a changing environment, so this information is really valuable. I also want to thank all the participants. And before you log off, we do ask you to fill out our very, very short survey. It will take you less than a minute. There's a link in the chat to the survey and also the QR code on the screen. Oh, wait, there's another question. Hold on. So I'm wondering if the person who just raised their hand, if they could put their question in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to say thanks. CAF America will be
the opportunity to talk. Jean, thank you for the opportunity for CAF America to present. And if there are questions after the fact, we're happy to have conversations, guidance, input. So please reach out, and definitely happy to help.
Okay, and these slides and the recording will be shared in a follow-up email. So thanks everyone. I hope you have a great afternoon and a good rest of your week.